was born in a small town in northern Manitoba. Didn't live there for very long, and my parents separated when I was pretty young. And so it was, I think that's probably where I first learned the strength of women. Is just my mom was a single mom for quite a while, and it was her and I looking after ourselves. And by the age of about 7 or so, I was in Winnipeg, and I've spent most of my life here in one way or another. I've spent some time away doing travel or education, but I've always come back here because all of my family's roots are here, and it's a really good place to live and fly out of or connect with other people out of. I got involved in water when I had finished my law degree, and I was working in an Indigenous organization that I helped found 20 years ago. Even though I'm not an Indigenous person, I was asked by 10 chiefs, First Nation chiefs in Canada, to help them set up what's called the Centre for Indigenous Environmental Resources. And that's a capacity building, non-political charitable organization. And it really focuses on the nexus between Indigenous rights and environmental protection. And it doesn't take long about learning from or working in partnership with Indigenous people to really understand the interconnectedness of all things, and how water is just at the foundation of it all. So intellectually and physically, I understood that. But I also just, since a very young girl, I just felt the most peaceful around water. It's just where I love being the most. And I didn't intend for that to be part of my career, but these things just moved that way. And I live near water now, and it's just the thing I think I love the most. Yeah, when I was in second year law school, we had a chief who's very well known in Canada to this day. His name is Phil Fontaine, and he was a Grand Chief and National Chief, and is a leader in residential schools, all the residential school healing and settlement. And he's an elder statesman now in Canada. At the time, though, he was leading the charge in Manitoba. It was only 8 years after, in Canada, Indigenous rights were constitutionalized, meaning they were finally protected in the Constitution of Canada. That happened in 1982. So this was around 1990. And what happened was the government of Canada wanted to amend the Constitution for a whole bunch of other reasons, totally unrelated stuff. And they weren't talking to Indigenous people. And that at the time, Grand Chief Fontaine was like, you've got to be kidding me. We just had all of our rights constitutionalized and you're ignoring us again. And I was in second year law school, and Grand Chief Fontaine lived in Winnipeg. He was a Manitoban. And so it was this amazing process of learning, what is all of this? Law school didn't teach us anything about this. And I was watching constitutional reform or lack thereof right in front of my face, right here in my city. And the Indigenous people, stopped that round of constitutional reform in Canada because of their rights and their fierce defense of their rights. And so as I was 28 years old or so, I was just absolutely amazed by this. And so I just went and met him, and I worked part-time and volunteer. I just wanted to work in the organization. And that's how I got to know him and many others through that. And it set my career. That's what I've worked in ever since. Well, at that time, one of the biggest cases in Canadian history on Indigenous rights came through at a mid-court level, so not the Supreme Court. It's called Delgamuukw, and it was the thing that started to acknowledge Indigenous laws, Indigenous rights, that Indigenous knowledge can be evidence in law. But it was at the Court of Appeal level, and that's when I was volunteering with what was called the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs. It's still called that, but it was a case this thick, and they just wanted help sort of understanding what's the meaning of this, what's the implication. So that was literally, I spent most of my summer working on describing that case. And then went back to school and I finished my law degree. And I then I went to the law firm I chose was the one that did most of the Indigenous law for Chief Fontaine, because I knew that that's what I wanted to do in my work. And I worked under a very well-known lawyer at that time who was Chief Fontaine's main lawyer. I was just a junior lawyer. I did, whatever I could kind of. And then eventually what happened was something very typical, which is the government of Canada came to Chief Fontaine and said, we've figured out how to solve a couple of your problems. One of them is waste management on reserve, and the other one was this thing called harmonization, which is where you have federal and provincial laws that kind of overlap and bump over each other, and they don't do it well, and they were trying to harmonize those laws. And so there was two very different issues, but in typical form, Canada had come up with a potential solution without involving Indigenous people. And so they had asked Chief Fontaine, Grand Chief Fontaine, what do you think of these things? And he showed them to me because he knew I had an interest in environmental work. And we talked about the fact that this is the fundamental problem that needed to change. We needed to create an institution where Indigenous people could do the work themselves, could figure out the answers to those questions themselves, could decide and build their own capacity and really start to solve their own problems in the environmental field rather than having Canada or another government do it. So that's where the idea really started. And he pulled from his colleagues of the day that were really invested and interested in the environment and kind of had it as part of their scope as chiefs. There are many chiefs, there's like over 600 at any given time in Canada. And so he kind of worked with the ones that he thought really had demonstrated an environmental spin to the work that they did and environmental interest. And he asked me to do the legal work to set it up. And so I did. I set it up as a charity, working in private practice. And then eventually the chiefs on the board, there was 10 chiefs, and eventually they just asked if I would like to come over and be in-house counsel. So just work in the organization as a lawyer. And then I've been there ever since. It's been almost 27 years in one capacity or another. I have been executive director, legal counsel, project person, just all kinds. I just love the organization so much. Love what they're doing. The people are amazing. And so I stay there. It's one of my hats. It's a hat that I love wearing. And I've been working to, help build that organization so that it, with my other colleagues on the executive team, as an organization that'll survive in perpetuity, because it's never been government funded. It doesn't have any independent source of money. So it's been like pull up from the bootstraps kind of organization. And so it's done amazing work though. And at the same time, of course, I've continued my legal career and then also done some transboundary work through being recently, last few years, a commissioner with the International Joint Commission. So I'm always juggling these hats, trying to find the opportunity to have impact where I can have the most impact. SEER has about 15 people at any given time, operates across Canada. We've probably done 500 projects, like with 400 different First Nations in Canada in the life it's had. It's an amazing organization. And that's partly why I can do other things, is also because they are dedicated and brilliant and really creative with, how to build partnerships and how to find resources for those projects to happen. And I mean, I'd probably do it the way any other woman or person does juggling, right? I have support. I have people who I would not be able to do any of this without, from things like just somebody to look after my dogs when I go on business trips, all the way up to amazing people in the organizations I work in. Like the IJC has 200 people along the border that do the bulk of the actual day-to-day work on our boards and in our staff. And And on my legal career, I'm not a general practice lawyer. I negotiate. What I mostly do is co-development or collaborative negotiating of water agreements, water law, Indigenous water rights, things like that, collaborative governance mechanisms. I focus my career mostly on that. So I'm just selective, I guess, with the opportunities I choose or am lucky enough to get. They're frequently overwhelming. I mean, I'm constantly, some of the strategies are probably less healthy than others. One of them is I have to compartmentalize. Sometimes I just can't think about some of the bigger, harder issues because I can bottom out thinking about, like anybody, if you're in tune with the world at all, it's impossible not to feel just overwhelming, sometimes grief and pain about that. And so sometimes I have to just not look there in order to keep working. And I have another mental strategy, which is regardless of the outcome, I know what I'm here to do. I figured that out about 25 years ago, that the outcome ultimately was much bigger than me. And I'm here to do this work. And I just know myself well enough. I know what I care about. I know what I'm here to do. I know what my skills are pretty well. And so I just accepted that it didn't matter ultimately. That's my place. My time on earth is spent doing that work. And then the third thing is just, I think the best part for me of every single day is when I'm out walking in the forest with my dogs. It's a simple thing where I feel the wind and the sun and the trees, and I just feel the earth. And every day I prioritize finding 1.5 hours, if I can do it 2, where I'm out in nature, and I will drive to get there, but it's something I will never, ever miss, because I know even when it feels like I'm so stressed, I don't have the time for this. It's the thing that just calms me right down, and I remember why I'm doing this, and I feel joy, just joy. And that's what I need to be able to keep doing the work. It was actually a 6 days on the couch kind of moment with the curtains closed. I think I had a mini crisis in, my late 20s. Yeah, where I thought, oh my goodness, this is what it is. This is life. This is what work is. This is and it was really significant for me. It was a tough moment where I just got clarity about both kind of how grim things could be and what the whole path I was on. You get out of your adolescence, you get out of university, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that's what this is all about. And it just happened in that moment. I chose to come out of it. And you've got to remember, I had a prior moment of a reckoning that I had successfully come out of. When I was 22 years old, I was in an accident at work where I lost my hand. That's why I have this prosthesis on. And it was while I was in university. It was my summer job. I got hurt at work, and I was 22. And so I built a resilience to maybe really traumatic events through that. It was a sink or swim moment. We all face them, and you either keep moving or you don't, right? And I did, and I had help, of course, and all of that. But I just realized that was the physical moment of figuring out who I was physically, happened when I was 22. And then kind of mentally and emotionally, it happened, 8 or so years later, 8 or 10 years later, kind of thing, where I kind of went, okay, this is, I guess, what I am here now, mentally and spiritually and emotionally, what I'm going to do. I think I know that I personally relied on a whole bunch of different people. Probably, I would have to say everyone from my mother to the person who was the union representative when I lost my hand. He became a wonderful friend of mine. I have since had mentors who just operate at a level spiritually and intellectually where we have conversations. And I went into therapy for a decade. You know, you just keep working at it all the time, right? I try and work my body, I try and work my mind, I try and work my heart, you know, and figure out the connections between all these things. And there are times that that's completely necessary, and that's just what I did. And so it was a combination of family, friends, professionals, and I don't know if it's water people, but I have such an amazing community among water folks. It's like I can think of probably 20 people who are a range of friends to just really close colleagues that wouldn't quite be friends, but close, where I think we just feel each other's world really well, because we just know to do water work, you're so connected in. And so it's just a combination of things, but I've had to seek them out. I'm single. I've had to seek them out, work at it, commit to that kind of thing, because it is the sustaining force in all of this, right? Is this sense of connection with other people who are kind of like-minded and understand when you're like the whole thing is becoming a little much, and they help remind me when to say no, and you know, those kind of things. So well, there's two that I routinely think of, and one is a proverb, which is, I think it's a Japanese proverb. I can't remember if it's Chinese or Japanese. I should know, but it's the fall down 7, get up 8 quote. I don't know if you've ever heard that one. That, you know, what you do is the thing is, if you fall down 7 times, but you get up 8 times, which means you just always keep going, right? And so I think about that one. And then the other one is this one, which is in front of my computer all the time. It's right here, just in front of me. And it's funny, it's a John Wayne quote, and I'm not a John Wayne fan. And I know as a person, he wasn't awesome, but I love this quote, which is, "Courage is being scared to death and saddling up anyway." That's what this coaster is, and it's in front of me all the time. Because sometimes I feel like I'm up against people who don't necessarily want to hear the message, or don't necessarily, you know, it's hard work. Even diplomacy, especially diplomacy, actually, is really trying. It's really emotionally trying and intellectually trying, because of all of the relationships at in play there. And I am by nature an impatient person. I want to see change. I don't like working at the pace of governments. That's why I've never worked in government. I want to do things on the ground and create movement. And so having the courage to say things when you know the entire room isn't going to like that, and you're pushing too hard. It's called too hard, pushing too hard, you know. It's hard to do that sometimes, but I try. My confidence, I consider myself kind of fairly confident right now, and it took me a long time to get here, to find the voice of what I believe in and what I want to say. I worked really, really hard. My strategy is to be over prepared, you know, work hard. And I just wish I could go back 20 years and say, you're okay, you know, you're actually good. You can be confident in yourself much earlier than I did. That would be I think, believing. It sounds like such a common thing to believe in yourself, but it's really the truth. It's to just have confidence that the thing in your heart that you don't even know why or what, it's pulling you towards something. Just trust that and go there. Just keep going there. And if I'd known that a bit earlier, I might have been able to do more than I even have at this point, I guess. But that would be it, I guess. I can still struggle. I hope I get to the end of my life where I don't think this sometimes, which is when you're following that thing you know to be true, but the pushback you're getting is so strong, and sometimes tinged with an attitude that you know is either gender-based or something. I hope some point I can not have just the littlest bit of doubt that says, am I crazy? Like, am I doing something wrong? what's the thing, and not have it internalized to me that there's somehow, like, to just be so pure in my knowledge that this is the right thing to do, and not internalize any of that stuff from the outside that's trying to make you think you're crazy, like you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. That's the thing that would be really great. So work in progress always. Well, I mean, it's the thing of resilience, right? I remember working with an Indigenous nation who defined resilience as that which bends but does not break, right? And so if in the face of this pushback, you bend and you think and you recommit and connect and go, yeah, no, that's okay, I'm good. And then you come back and and that process of reflection is critical. I completely agree, particularly because sometimes that pushback has real validity to it. There's actually pieces in that you didn't think about, or, we have to integrate, and most of my work is on collaboration. And so it can't just be one way or the other. It is about finding kind of the ethical space or the common space. And that means everybody has to bend a bit, including me. And so, yeah, that process, it's the internal strength, I think, that is just always being built, internal conviction.